What's happening? And we are back. Well, the members of El Chile are here. So me, Run PMC, and Nopal decided to keep it going. A Rod had a really good thing going, man, and we enjoyed talking boxing, dude. So we're all here. What's up, fellas?
What's going
How's it
on?
going?
Glad to be back.
Dude, me too. A lot of boxing to get into, you know what I mean? And A Rod continues to be our hermano. I think he's going under a different name now, but he always has an open invitation, always to come and join us, to join his hermanos and come back and talk some boxing if he ever has some free time. And, hopefully we'll have some guests along the way. But man, we were gone for 1 week, but I feel like, a lot of shit's happened. So I want to do a little bit of a catch up. And also, of course, we're going to preview Fury versus Wilder. So it should be a good episode.
Yeah, looking forward to it. I feel the same way. Is that we take 1 week off, but then a bunch of drama pops off with some of the topics we're going to talk about today, and then we're right at fight week now about the fight that we been seems like we've been waiting for a long time. Fury Wilder 3. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, man. Well, the one thing that I really want to get into, and is I did talk a little bit about this on the shoe shine, but man, I really want to talk about Joshua Usyk and what your guys' thoughts are. Tell me what you saw, and like, what are your thoughts on Usyk? What are your thoughts on Joshua?
Um, for me, I thought I was very impressed with Usyk. Going into the fight, I was joking around with throughout some of the other chats within HCP that this is going to be the first step towards Wilder Usyk undisputed in 2022, and I was really impressed how he looked. He looked way better than he did in his previous two fights at heavyweight against Chaz Witherspoon, and then also against his last fight against Derek Chisora. So he looked very good. I'm surprised how he. It seemed like he was much more active throughout the fight. This being Usyk, but he held on to his stamina very, very well throughout the fight, and it seemed like he was constantly the one making the fight, in my opinion. And also, it seems like he actually gassed AJ out, which was surprising to me since AJ was a little smaller. But I thought it was a great fight. Usyk definitely now has 3 of the 4 belts at heavyweight, and hopefully, even though we've seen some of the managerial stuff on the Wilder and Frank Warren side. Say there probably won't be immediate undisputed, but hopefully we can get it next year, whoever the winner of this weekend is.
Oh yeah, what do you think, No Ball? What were your thoughts, man?
Um, I thought that AJ did really bad in this fight. Um, Initially, before the fight, I always thought that, I thought it was a 50-50 fight. But with all the hype surrounding it, I was just thinking, okay, I'm gonna give Joshua a 55 and 45% chance for Usyk, knowing damn well that you know AJ has a lot of shortcomings, right? And we saw those with the Andy Reeves fight. So in this particular fight, I gave AJ round 6, 8, 9, and 10. And 9 and 10 were actually swing rounds. They were even, but I thought maybe Joshua did a little more, you know, enough to steal the round. Um, in this fight right here, I found myself wanting to give AJ some rounds, but at the same time, I was holding back because I'm like, well, if I'm gonna give uh, AJ some rounds just because he finally kind of hit Usyk a little bit, I don't think that's correct because technically he's still losing the round. And I think that's like something that happens to us sometimes when we're judging fights and the other one guy's so overwhelming with his activity compared to the other guy that it comes a point where at a certain point you just want to give him a round, so he can have some rounds in there. Mentally, I think that we find ourselves in that place, and this was the case with this fight, and you know, but believe it or not, you know, I do think that there's a lot of things that, as bad as AJ did, I do believe that there's a lot of things that he can work on. There's a lot of tactics that he can use to try to pull off a win. You know, uh, you look at heavyweights in the past that struggled with the shorter guys because uh, sometimes, you know what, if you start looking at boxing, you'll notice that the shorter guys are like, sometimes they're at a perfect size to just get in there and, you know, hit the bigger guy in there's so many targets for the little guy to just wail off on the big guy. And you'll see that certain camps have caught on to this. So you'll see the bigger heavyweights using a lot of tactics, like grabbing the guy, leaning on him. They do a lot of stuff. They tie the guy up a lot, and that basically takes the other guy's opportunities all away. And AJ wasn't doing none of this in this fight. I think that, even if he would have used the same game plan that he did with Andy Ruiz a little bit, he would have been a little more successful than he was this time. And I know Roy Jones Jr. around the 6th round, he was saying that, oh, okay, Usyk, AJ's adjusting, and Usyk hasn't adjusted. Well, that's one thing that I dislike when people say that, because if your plan A is already working and it's getting you all the rounds, why are you going to adjust for? AJ was the one that, it was necessary for him to adjust. So he adjusted. The other guy's game plan is working, so why would he even adjust? Yeah. So I thought that that Usyk, did a lot of good things in there.
Dude, I agree. No, Paul. And, one of the things that you said was about Joshua's shortcomings. And that's something that was apparent too. I think that it's important that everybody give Usyk the credit that he deserves, and I think for the most part, everyone has, but I agree, man. I do think that there's things that Joshua could have done. Like Usyk did what he's really good at. I wasn't sure if it would translate into being a great form at the heavyweight division, but he's really shown that he's transitioned very well. So I got to give him his credit, but as far as what I saw with Joshua, man, like I saw a lot of holes in his game, just like everybody else did, and over time, bro, like I've noticed his shortcomings, but I've kind of overlooked them because he's still winning by knockout most of the time. He's still got a very good record, in the lead up to this, and he still has a good record after this, right? So, I mean, he's pretty good. He's fought a lot of top heavyweights. He hasn't fought the top heavyweights, but outside of that, he has a very good resume with a lot of wins, but there were things that I kind of overlooked. Like I've already mentioned the Klitschko fight, after the Klitschko fight, he said something like, hey, man, I shouldn't be taking this much abuse. And I kind of wrote that off. I'm like, okay, well, he's in a tough fight. That's okay, but, to me, he didn't look that great in the Joseph Parker fight, and I'm like, okay, well, he's got to get past. That was one fluke type fight. Yeah, the ref was kind of weird too. So, okay, I'm going to overlook that one, But in the Pulev fight, I remember thinking, and this was after the Ruiz fight, and he got knocked out. And to me, it was very weird. I was watching that fight during the first Ruiz fight. And I remember just thinking like, wow, this guy, he just looks so indifferent, before the fight, kind of, he has his mouthpiece out. Like he just doesn't have like this killer instinct that he's ready to go to war. Like he doesn't realize he's about to do battle, and then I remember watching the Pulev fight and thinking to myself like, wow, this guy, you could tell he's really thinking in there. Like, it looks like he's kind of thinking, okay, well, I'm going to stick and move here. I'm going to move to the left. Okay. Now I'm going to move to the right. Kind of like that, and a person should think, obviously a person should have ring IQ, but to me, it needs to be more instinctual, kind of like when Dwyer says that term, adaptive reactive. Like he doesn't have the ability, in my opinion, to kind of change things up, right away. Like it's like you could tell he was thinking, and then that's what I saw in this Usyk fight. Like he was too busy thinking, but the thing is that like Usyk was already outmaneuvering him with hand speed, with foot speed. So I mean, Joshua really didn't have an opportunity to even try to get that foot game going. Might have been even worse for him if he did, because, say he got his foot on the outside. Like, I mean, Usyk in a couple seconds would have reverted things immediately, so it's like, it was hard to watch in a way, and so like, now that I'm seeing all these things and I'm starting to get more of like a full picture about Anthony Joshua, and I'm not ready to write him off yet, but this idea that he can make some changes, like, he could definitely change his style up, but I think there's certain things about him that have already should have been done. Like, this idea of like, oh, well, he needs to learn how to clinch. It's like, man, he should, he's the big guy. He should have been clinching already. And this whole like, oh, I can't wait to get back to game planning. I'm going to come back. I'm going to reenact the rematch clause. I'm like, well, game planning, bro. Like you had plenty of rounds to make adjustments, like you can't always do like with the second Ruiz fight, he had an opportunity to adjust. But I mean, Ruiz isn't Usyk, and Usyk's going to bring a whole slew of problems. Now he knows them even better, on top of that too, man, like at the end, we saw that he just didn't have the grit to go toe to toe to try to defend his 3 belts. It is what it is, man. Like I was watching the fight and I'm sitting there thinking, wow, this guy, he's like unwilling to go out on his shield. He doesn't like getting hit. I mean, and there are fighters like that. And Anthony Joshua, like he's just so indifferent. Like I remember when he was in the middle of getting knocked out by Ruiz, he was kind of asking his corner, like, oh, what will he do next? I'm like, okay, well, I mean, what do you think he's going to do next? He's going to try and knock your head off, dude. And like with the Usyk thing, like he's all sitting there smiling at the end, gets saved like 5 seconds or shed off the clock for his benefit. And to me, I thought it was extremely disturbing how coordinated all that was. So can Anthony Joshua make a comeback? I think he can, but I think it's safe to say, in my opinion, that he'll never be at the top. He never really did face the top guys at heavyweight. He never did. He got his belts out of the garbage bin, like Fury likes to say. And so we'll see how things play out.
Yeah, I agree. And I was also disturbed about how Joshua wouldn't go out on his shield late in the fight, because even in the 12th round, he knows he's down. There's no way he thought he was winning, he was ahead in that fight. And if he does, then he is completely delusional, because there was no way. I had the fight 9-3, and that was really me giving every benefit of the doubt to Anthony Joshua. But even when you see when Usyk was sort of flooring on him and he's on the ropes, he's like sticking out his tongue and smiling. It's like, if you're going to lose 3 of the 4 belts at heavyweight and you're just sort of joking around on the ropes, that's not really the best approach. I think I would be, I mean, it's easy for me to say, but you would think that someone that thinks of themselves as the baddest man on the planet, they would go out swinging, and they would go, if they get knocked out, they're going to lose anyway. It doesn't, you losing unanimous decision opposed to you losing knockout, they both look like losses on your box rec. So if you actually try to win, that's much better than just packing it in. And then it's like, it gets me thinking, they ring the bell early. Did he think he was going to win a decision or get a draw? In my opinion, yes, because the way he acted, there's no way that he thought, like, why wouldn't you go for it? It's just sort of an odd thing to me. And like, there's been weird stuff happens in the UK. We can talk about just Dillian White's gloves, Dillian White's drug test. When Malik Scott knocked down behind the head Jarek Chisora, he gets up at 8, they call him out. It's just weird things that happen to that in favor of sort of the domestic fighter over there, that maybe Joshua actually thought he was going to get the decision after that, which would be absurd, but maybe he did. I don't know.
All right. Well, that leads me to my next thing. We've kind of had a good chance to break down, what Usyk did well and what Joshua did wrong. But as far as Usyk and his overall skill set, there's been a lot of talk, man. A lot of people were excited to bring Usyk to the conversation about pound for pound number 1. So I want to know what you guys think. Like, what are your thoughts about pound for pound, and is Usyk number 1 in your opinion?
I got sort of mixed thoughts on this one, because up until last week, when it seemed like pound for pound was really discussed thoroughly throughout some of the channels, I really didn't know that history about pound for pound. I was in the camp where I thought pound for pound was created to compare fighters to the heavyweight champion. I didn't know that previously heavyweights were included on the pound for pound ranking, if people do have those types of rankings. But I don't know. I mean, if I were to look at it, like, whenever I think about pound for pound, I usually don't include heavyweights on there, but I could see the argument for that being. And I think Usyk is, I think he's definitely in the discussion to be considered like the top fighter in boxing. I would still give it to Canelo, but I think Usyk, if he were to become undisputed heavyweight, I think he would be considered the top boxer in boxing, in my opinion.
What do you think, No Paul? Usyk, did he knock off Canelo in your opinion, or what?
I don't think so, man, because like, I think Usyk did really good, and I already thought he was on the pound for pound list when he used to be a cruiserweight. When he became undisputed at cruiserweight, I thought he was up there. You know what I mean? I considered him, like 1 or 2 or 3. I thought that was a big accomplishment, but things have changed. You know what I mean? And when you look at Canelo's career right now, he's basically the daddy of 4 divisions as we speak. You know what I mean? The only division that has a question mark whether he can, rule that division is light heavyweight. If you think about it, and so he's been unified in 3 different divisions as we speak already, and has titles in 4 of them. Legit titles in 4 divisions, beaten a bunch of champions, recognized champions. He's beaten guys that were on the pound for pound list. Triple G was considered pound for pound number 1. And even if you think that Canelo lost the first fight, I mean, it's very easy to see that, at the least you can give me is that, there was a very different set of skills that was displayed in those two fights. You know what I mean? One guy that could adjust to different, you know, that could do a lot of stuff, you know, and the other guy just sticking to one game plan, you know. And I don't think to this day, I don't think Usyk has beaten somebody as in a competitive fight or somebody as good as Triple G, you know, because Triple G was on a different level, in my opinion, you know. Not to mention, I don't think that uh, I don't even think that AJ rises to the pose the risk that Kovalev posed to Canelo. You know, I don't think that he posed that, you know, like that big of a risk, like the difference. But at the same time, I mean, you know, I do hold them pretty high. I think, you know, as far as him being a heavyweight and all that, I still, you know what I mean? These type of things, they're they're kind of like fantasy lists anyway. So, you know, as time goes on, it's okay for the definition of the pound for pound list to change, you know. When you got a guy like Usyk, if he goes in there and just whoops every heavyweight, how are you not gonna, unless, you know, Canelo goes in there and beats every light heavyweight, then it'll be up and they could be at a tie or they could be the same. It just it's whatever each individual person wants to whatever you feel that you have to do on your pound for pound list. Now, I do got to say that in my opinion, if Canelo was like 6 feet tall, I think he'd go in there and probably whoop on Usyk. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, it is a fantasy list, so you know what I mean. I could, like I said, if he was like 6 feet tall, I could see him figuring out a way to beat Usyk. You know, or I could, by the very least, I could see a very competitive fight. You know.
Nah, man. Sorry, go ahead, Rumpy FC.
I have a question about like just pound for pound lists in general that you all might be able to answer. When you're looking at a pound for pound list, because like D style was talking about, which I agreed with, that you're differentiating it by skill, right? Like the most skilled fighter is at top, but obviously you have to mix in accomplishments with that. But I have a question. Do you guys think when you're looking at pound for pound fighters, say if Lomachenko did get the title fight in his first fight, and then say it was for an undisputed title, and he is only 1-0, but he's undisputed in like one weight class, and then he's do you do you think if you have do you think your record matters, or do you think it's your accomplishments? I guess what I'm trying to say, is it solely based on skill or solely based on accomplishments, or is it a mix of both when you formulate like your guys' pound for pound?
It should be a mix, in my opinion. Everything should be a mix of everything. Like for
Right.
example, I wanted, as far as you bringing up Lomachenko, I wanted to say that if I had a choice, because I never make a pound for pound list uh, that includes like 10 fighters or more. I just do a top five. Of course, with Usyk and all that, now I might have to add another guy, you know. But as far as the big list like that, I would still actually put Lomachenko ahead of Teofimo. And Lomachenko
Right.
has what, two losses, but that's just my opinion. I still feel that he has a lot more skills than Teofimo Lopez. You know what I mean? And so I still put him ahead for the reason being that, in my opinion, you know what I mean. When I was more heavily, when I started really looking into boxing, it was a time when you had Floyd, you had Marquez, you had Pacquiao, all on the pound for pound list, and these little guys were whooping on bigger guys. So to me, pound for pound always meant kind of that your skills far, you know, far outweigh the weight class that you're in. You know, they surpass it, and you have the ability to compensate for that, for the for your small stature, and you can whoop on guys that are bigger than you. So that's the way I looked at it. But you know what I mean? I think it should be, to be fair, it should be a mixture of everything, because you can't just go by the eye test, because you still got to put it into practice. You know what I mean? You still got to go through those hard risks that you got to take, you know, to show that you're pound for pound, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree. And like another thing I think about is like, what do you guys think about when you value something? So, would you value undisputed? Like, say Crawford was undisputed at 140, but it was a pretty pedestrian way he got the titles. So, would you look at that as being, say, you get undisputed at a weight class, but you get your belts from really like people that aren't really, or boxers that aren't really that well acclaimed, or you fight for no belts and then you're fighting all the top guys. Do you like what do you think, which one would you value more?
I mean, that's a great question. And, it kind of goes into your question about Lomachenko. Like, say Lomachenko fought once for undisputed because somebody else had all the belts. I think it's kind of also a good example as to why, I don't necessarily rank Usyk's win over Joshua as like, oh my gosh, look at this guy. He's a unified 3-belt champion, which he is. You know what I mean? But it was somebody who already did all the work. So if you're asking me if Lomachenko comes into a division, fights once, and goes undisputed, like I would have a lot of questions. Like, one, undisputed should mean, typically speaking, that guy is the man, of the division. And he would be, unless, of course, there was a lineal champ actively fighting in that same division, right? But say there's not, and, there's a new lineal champion that's established. Well, what's the division look like? If you win once, I mean, is it a weak division? Like you said, Ndongo wasn't the best unified champion ever, but Crawford gets the credit for being undisputed. But I mean, that doesn't necessarily make him the best as far as, like, in my opinion, pound for pound. I think that makes him the best at 140, but I have to assess the division. So when I look at pound for pound, I think about the skill set and the resume. And then I also factor in the accomplishments. But I look at it a little bit differently. To me, I think that a number one ranked person who's already fought like number 2, number 3, to me, that person is already the man. Like, there's this idea that like, oh, you need to be undisputed. Well, if a particular sanctioning body makes this one person the mandatory for a belt, like, to me, like, yeah, a person can go and get that belt. But to me, like, that person's ranking isn't necessarily something I would agree with. And we've seen many times where number 2, number 3 ranked contenders, number 1 ranked contenders are jokes and are just kind of like, mandatories are flies sometimes, So I don't put so much credence into the sanctioning body sometimes, but I do factor in lineal status. I do factor in rankings. So, like, if Canelo was to go in, fight the number 1 guy, number 2 guy, like he's done in multiple divisions, except for like 175, like, to me, that makes you the man until you're not the man. Somebody else will always come along. So nothing's ever settled in boxing, so I do factor in accomplishments, like if Canelo goes undisputed by fighting 3 undefeated champions, that's very impressive. And he did clean up the division, but there's already a little bit of a question that whether he will clean up the division and get the credit for it, because of course Benavidez was not challenged so far, even though he's not a current belt holder. But see, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, so that's why I don't necessarily hold the belts and as high of a prestige as other people. Like, to me, I'm not like, oh my God, undisputed is the greatest thing of all time. Like, to me, I think lineal is more important. So as far as comparing Canelo to Usyk, in my opinion, I think Usyk hasn't done enough yet. I thought his cruiserweight run was very impressive, but I didn't necessarily think that the cruiserweights were all that great. I was following at the time, but I wasn't like, oh my God, this is a great division. It was nice to see them mix it up, but I thought that Usyk was, the cream of the crop there, and he rightly won, and he rightly moved up to heavyweight like he should have. But, he went undisputed, and now he's a 3-belt holder off of 1 fight at heavyweight. So, I mean, Canelo's had 3 belts before. I mean, and he's about to go undisputed, and he's 31. Usyk's 34. Canelo's had more fights, but I mean, you could look at that 2 ways. You could look at that as like, okay, well, he's just, even though Usyk's been fighting since he was very, very young, like he kind of you could say he was less active and took more of a scenic route. You could also say, oh, well, Canelo's been fighting since he's 15, professional. So there's a lot of different ways you could look at it. But as far as timeline and age wise, Canelo's ahead of the game, and he's done it at different divisions, and his resume is the best in boxing. Now that Manny Pacquiao has retired, we can say that, Canelo at, the same age as a lot of these dudes, even younger than some of these dudes, has the best resume in boxing. I've never even heard anybody try to dispute it. So I factor in all that stuff. And I have to say, like, even though it's mythical and I don't care what other people think, I have Canelo as number 1 pound for pound. I could see the argument that Usyk is number 2, but I could also see somebody saying that he's number 3 with Crawford being number 2. So we'll see, but those are my opinions.
No, it all makes. Oh, sorry, no, Paul.
Yeah, I wanted to say, Run. That's a great question. I've always thought that the belts don't really matter. You know what I mean? I think that people pay way too much attention to undisputed, and don't get me wrong, it's a special thing. But in my opinion, it's only special when those belts are attached to legit champions that are whooping on fools. You know what I mean? Like I think that what Fury has done is very impressive. He's fought in the big names, and not always it hasn't always mattered about the belts. I mean, the dude says that he's the lineal champ anyways, and he's the man that beat the man. And I think that the fights are way better than the belts. I think that if everybody just if one guy had a belt and the other guy had a belt and there was some problem between the sanctioning bodies, they don't want to make the fight. And I think that if both of these dudes vacated their belts and the sanctioning bodies decided, hey, well, we're going to get you back and give these belts away to somebody, on a like a vacant opportunity type deal, which they always do. But I think that the important part of this is that those two champions who we knew were true champions, if they decided to fight each other with no belts, I think that that's the important part. And a fight like that should get you into the Hall of Fame if it's important enough. If the other guy's got a good enough resume, you got a good enough resume, and they decide to drop the belts before the fight, I think that fight's still a very legit fight, you know? And it sounds kind of like a fantasy because that type of thing don't happen. But I do remember occasions where a certain fighter has told the other guy, well, just drop your belt and we can fight, Because, sometimes the fighters use the belt as a bargaining chip, you know what I mean? Where, hey, you got to pay me $10 million because I got this belt, And the other guy, they're kind of using it to get a bunch of money from the other dude when in reality they're not worth that much. So I do think that the resume is way more important than the belts, in my opinion. So yeah, go ahead, Ron.
No, thanks for your thoughts. No, I agree, and like up until recently, I've been really a staunch supporter of fighting for undisputed, but I think where I waver on that is like what you guys said, when the best fighters in a given division aren't belt holders, then I don't think undisputed is that important. Because what I think about is like Canelo right now. Canelo, if he wanted just to fight everyone and he said he didn't want to get undisputed, he would still have big fights. He could still make big fights, and it would seem like he would have fewer sort of roadblocks in when he has to make fights. But he's at a status where it's like the belts don't matter. Where it's like as you grow, I feel like some boxers when they grow up, they want to become a world champion, right? So once I think they get a few of those belts, and if they're a household name or they've reached a certain level, then they don't really need the belts. But then at the same time, then you have other fighters that might not want to fight certain fighters just because they're not bringing, because you've heard it throughout the years, like Thurman to Spence, oh, you need a belt and then you can come talk to me type of thing in recent years. And it's been used the other way where it's like, oh, I don't want to pay a sanctioning fee. Why do we have to fight for the belt? And then fighters have to drop a belt in order to get a fight with someone. So it's sort of an interesting thing. But I agree with what also I was looking at the chat, what Long Live Boxing said. It always comes back to your resume because it's like, that's the main thing that matters in boxing is your wins. And if you can keep winning, that's the main thing. If you're fighting good opponents, like consistent consistent wins against quality opponents, in my opinion, is the most important thing in boxing. Because if you think about it, like not to get too far off boxing, but like I think about this, if you look at like Hall of Fame football players, like if you're looking at quarterbacks, like Jim Plunkett, when he obviously a quarterback, went to Stanford, played for various teams, and then the Raiders at the end. He was a quarterback of 2 Super Bowl winning teams. He's not in the Hall of Fame. And then you have guys that never won a Super Bowl like Dan Marino, but have great numbers, that are in the Hall of Fame. So it's just things to think about when people formulate your list. It's like, what do you value more? Like skills? Like you can have great skills and lose, but then you could have not the best skills, but you keep winning because your style is good. So I think the resume is the most objective thing you can look at. Just like you highlighted the quote from Long Live Boxing. I think it's if you keep winning, that's the main thing. If it's a quality opposition consistently.
Yeah, man, I agree with all that. And it's like Nopal was saying earlier, man, it costs money to be a unified champion. Like I've always said personally, like I care more about ranking. And if you've fought the person who's ranked number 2, number 3, if you've earned your way towards being number 1, after that, like to me, dude, it is a business decision to go ahead and try to be undisputed. A person can hold their belt hostage. And it's like, I don't need that fight to happen to tell me who the man is if somebody's already cleaned up the division a little bit. Because there's always the next guy to see. Like, for instance, Canelo's had to pay Caleb Plant $10 million more than he's worth. And I hear people say, oh, get your money, Caleb Plant, get your money. I mean, that's all well and good. you know. But to me, it's like I don't need anybody to tell me who the number one ranked super middleweight is, in my opinion. And to me, it's going to be questioningly Canelo once this fight happens. And if when he does fight for all these belts, dude, you know, if a sanctioning body charges 3%, Canelo will literally be paying millions of dollars to fight for all those belts. And after this, if he decides to drop some belts because he doesn't want to pay those sanctioning fees or fight mandatories, I'm not going to hold it against him. Most undisputed fighters move on immediately after. And I get it. You know, like I don't think necessarily that Canelo's going to move up, but if he sheds those belts and the sanctioning bodies put belts on these dudes that, you know, I might not agree with, I'm not going to sit there and go, oh, well, he's not the real champion until he faces Darrell, who's, I mean, look at fucking people lost their shit when Canelo had to fight Yildirim, right? Number one ranked mandatory, right? So like, you know, for me to put this credence in what the sanctioning bodies have to say, I've been on record for a long time saying like, I really don't care how they rank people sometimes. Like sometimes I agree with their rankings, you know, and sometimes I don't.
No, agreed. And I think that last time I looked at the bylaws, I forgot if it was the IBF or the WBC, but I think it's pretty consistent. Maybe not with the WBO because they seem like they're on their own island doing their own thing away from the other three sanctioning bodies. But I think you just need to be in the top 15 to be eligible to be considered for a belt. So that's not that hard. So, but the mandatories really throw a wrench into everything because when you start having mandatories and they do, and as you know, like sometimes in like the rankings for each sanctioning body differ. So you might, how does that happen? You're supposed to have three mandatories in 1 year because you're supposed to like defend a mandatory every year. How are you supposed to do that, especially with the activity of like modern day boxers, you know? So that's where it's like where I sort of like what Crawford did where he got all the belts and then he vacated them because it's like he became undisputed, but it's hard to justify defending all the belts when you're going to be divvying up 12% of your purse to sanctioning bodies that I really don't know the function of at this point because they don't secure the venue, which is done by the promoter. They don't supply the ringside staff and the referees, which is done by the commission. What do they actually do at this point? You know what I mean? Opposed to give you a belt, which I know some sanctioning bodies, you actually have to pay for yourself. Like the meaning the fighter, you have to pay them for the belt. So I mean, that's just what I've seen, but I don't know what they really do at this point. But that being said, I still do like Undisputed just because it gets to show like it puts us sort of in a tournament style format for some of these if people do value the belts, and I do like the tournaments within the certain division. So I'm sort of on both sides with it, but I can see the pros and cons.
Yeah, you
And
know,
two, I
G
want,
Funky are. Go ahead.
yeah, well, go ahead and read his comment.
Well, yeah, G Funky here. Our Hermano says it's much harder to go after all the belts in division than picking and choosing champions in divisions. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you know, that is true, but the fallback with that is you're fighting a bunch of bums who don't, you know, a bunch of mandatory for guys that don't even deserve to fight you, you know, like that that are actually wielded power to negotiate a fight and take about 40% of your purse. You know what I mean? Which is unfair if you're in a position that you're generating all this money, and then you know a guy out of nowhere gets a chance, like Yildirim gets a chance to, you know, hold that over your head and basically say, and if you're he's not happy because you don't want to give him the 40%. If he's not happy, he still has the power to negotiate pretty close to that 40% of that purse. And you know, so when you look at it that way, it's not fair for every fighter. We remember what they just did at the Shakur uh situation where they put down the purse and they gave it to Shakur's favor because he's made more money. Now, I didn't think that was fair either, but I mean, they could have probably went 50-50 on that one, you know, in my opinion. But the so I'm not saying that what I'm saying basically is that it is much harder, but at the same time there is setbacks which sometimes don't allow certain fighters to fight other fighters because there is different sides of the streets, and we know how these promoters play. So, you know, I actually think that I was gonna say that that when you look at the situation, like, what if you have a champion and you know, and he gets all the belts and then just decides to drop them because he doesn't want to pay all them fees, and then he just decides to just be the franchise champ, you know. But and once he has that franchise title, that title, in my opinion, would probably represent being undisputed because the guy was already undisputed. So I don't think that the franchise thing it necessarily is a bad thing because it allows you to fight whoever you want, And if you're in that position where you've already proven that you're willing to take high risks and fight the guys that you need to fight to get the belts or whatever, I don't think that's such a bad thing.
Yes, and I see G Funky's point too, that it's much harder to collect the belts because the business of boxing gets in the way. And I think we're getting to a point now where we sort of were at with Floyd Mayweather in a way, whereas people are chasing the Canelo sweepstakes. So they might not value, belts as much because they're trying to, anyone from like maybe 160 to 175 is sort of putting their careers on hold to get a fight with Canelo, which you're sort of seeing with Floyd Mayweather from like even as low as when Marquez, like from 130 to like 147, 154-ish, like certain fighters that knew they could cut down or jump up would sort of put the career on hold. So maybe back then the belts didn't always align with the best fighters, but I'm hoping that we could like either Canelo makes it. That's why I appreciate Canelo going after undisputed because he's making it clear that I'm only fighting people with belts. So hopefully people will shift over to where they start valuing the belts because it's like we're going to get big fights with the belts. Whereas in the past, we've had people that maybe put their careers on hold because they're like, we want the sweepstakes, we want this, we want that. But if we can get a time where all the best fighters are aligned with getting the belts and the best fighters actually do have the belts, then I think undisputed is without a question probably the best thing we can do. But until then, we're at a point where we can do that. I could see it both ways.
Yeah, don't worry, 92 AKU. G Funky clearly isn't talking about Canelo. I'll tell you this. Boxing either way would be in a much better place if the criticism was like, oh man, like, I wish that these dudes wouldn't go and pick and choose champions. To me, like a lot of these fighters don't unify at all, bro, or move up and face champions. Like lots of divisions are stagnant, and we all recognize the ones that aren't and appreciate certain divisions where certain fighters are trying to get it done, trying to get unifications going. And we've already tracked how Canelo has always fought the absolute best at the divisions, except for 175 possibly, but that was not settled. But otherwise, he's always fought the number one ranked fighters, and he's just never fully worked his way down. That's all it is. So there's no way that G Funky can be talking about Canelo because we've already broken that down, and we're not going to make this about Canelo. But all I'm saying is like, as far as it being like the best thing to go undisputed, like y'all make a good point. Like the networks do make it hard. Like this Plant fight never popped off, but you could ask a lot of people, before this fight, like, well, what would have been the next best fight? Like after the Billy Joe Saunders fight, like who would you like to see Canelo fight next? And there's absolutely no consensus on who the best fight would be. And in fact, this is going to be, in my opinion, an easier fight for Canelo. I thought that Billy Joe was going to present a good amount of problems before Canelo took over, and that's what happened. But I always have said, and I'm on record saying that, it's going to be easier with Plant. So to me, I thought like in my mind, I have a few other fighters that I would prefer before the Plant fight, but I also understand him going for undisputed, him needing to get it done because of, criticisms, and having that little mark, being the first Latino in the 4-belt era to get it. Like I completely understand, but there's nobody really that stands out. So like Plant isn't the next logical best opponent, but I understand the circumstances as to why he's doing it.
Agreed. And the only fighter that I would want to see him fight, if Canelo wasn't going after undisputed, would have been David Benavidez, because I think that's a great fight, and I think he could present Canelo with just the youth, just being Canelo being like the older fighter now. He could just bring the aspects of what like a young boxer can bring, and I think he's more athletic than Caleb Plant, and I think he would just present issues just with hand speed. But I think Canelo would win still, but I don't think it's going to be a blowout like I think the Plant fight might be.
I agree as well, and shit. All right. Well, hey man, that was a good conversation. I could go on a little bit, but we got some other things to talk about, man. We got a heavyweight fight coming up. I want to get into Fury versus Wilder, but I don't think any of us have been on record about like what we think about Glovegate. So before we get into our predictions, I'd love just to know what you guys think about it.
Yeah, I mean, Glovegate in general, I'm not I don't back a lot of the theories that have come out and the hypotheses that people have brought forward with regarding it. I do think that obviously in like as you see like some of the smaller fights that glove tampering does go on, or maybe it's a manufacturing issue like we saw with that. I think it's the Ring City USA, the one when they had during the pandemic, they were fighting out of the wild card parking lot. They had an issue with some Clado Reyes gloves, and then they just got them a replacement pair, and that was done. But when fighters are caught with issues with their gloves, that is an indication that the commission is doing their job because they catch them. If they're not catching them, that's and then somehow it comes out after the fight that they're tampered with, then they didn't do their job. But Glovegate in general, I don't agree with just like the egg weights and the type of things surrounding that. I just think there's different types of styles of gloves. Some fighters prefer more padded glove. Some prefer like a pure laminated foam glove. Some prefer orthopedic gloves. Some prefer like a hybrid laminated foam with horsehair glove. But personally, if I would like to see something, it would be that maybe they come up with like a standard glove that's the only type of glove you use, and then the difference is only manufacturers like that would make your glove, like because you could still keep your sponsorship and be sponsored by a rival. And I know some gloves differ in how they like how the laces are angled, like as I know rival when they tie your gloves it's at like an angle, and like the laces are on a different part of the glove than a traditional glove. And then maybe you just want a different feel with like the padding inside or like just like the lining inside. But I think to set like I don't think there was an issue with the Fury's gloves in either fight. But if you were to really look at boxing, like back in the day, it seems like they would always just fight in like obviously there would be like a standard issued glove, whether it's a red Everlast or a red Clado Reyes from the commission, and then that would be it. But then like as you see, like as we near like the 2000s with the emergence of like Clado Reyes and Grant, uh, you look at more of like there started being negotiations, like in the Prince Nassim Ahmed, Marco Antonio Barrera fight. Hamed wanted a certain color Clado Reyes that was made out of goat skin, and then at the fight he wanted Barrera's gloves, and then they ended up just using standard issue Clado Reyes from the commission. So it's always up in the air, but I don't think glove gates are a real thing. I think it was just an excuse, but I'm glad we can get it all settled this weekend. I mean, knock on wood that no one tests positive for COVID or nothing weird happens in the fight, like a headbutt or anything, that it's like done in the second round. But hopefully, we can all put it to rest. Whoever wins this weekend, best man wins this weekend, and we could just move on.
Yeah, no, Paul. What do you think, man? Was the fix in, dude? Were the gloves loaded, bro?
Here's the thing, bro. I don't believe it. I think it's a bunch of excuses. I think just like Run said, but I will say this: if it did happen, there would have had to been a lot of people, including the commission and everybody in charge, in on it. So with those circumstances, uh, yeah, I think that it's kind of like you know, I wouldn't fault anybody for not believing in it because of that, because I think those are the only two choices. Either, it didn't happen, which I didn't see any evidence. I saw a bunch of excuses, or everybody's in on it except for us, the fans. You know what I mean? So it would have had to been a lot of people helping Fury to cheat. So I don't believe it. I think it's a bunch of excuses. We heard it started out with the costume at first, which was a joke, you know, which was a stupid. To put yourself in that circumstance to wear a costume that heavy, that was stupid to begin with. To say that it was too heavy, that was stupid too. And then all the other excuses, and my water got spiked and all that. I think it's all a bunch of BS. But dude, I'm super excited for this fight, man, because I think it's going to be a great fight.
Yeah, man. Great comments. And I have to say, dude, like I don't necessarily believe in Glovegate. I never have. But some of the reasons that people say that it couldn't be real, like I don't necessarily subscribe to. Like I've heard people kind of go, "Hey, man, well, the commission's there, like they don't mess up," And I'm not sitting there questioning the integrity of the commission. I'm not necessarily saying that I blindly trust them as all. Like to me, I've seen biased judging. Like is that not part of the commission? I've seen refs seemingly like in one fighter's pocket? Are they not part of the commission? Like, I don't think anybody's beyond corruption, and even with this whole like Watergate too and the spiked water, I don't know too much about Breland outside of his accolades. I never watched him fight. And I'm not saying that he did spike the water, but like when I hear some people kind of go, well, there's no way Breland would have done it. Hey, man, this guy was, an all-time great amateur. This guy's a welterweight, champion. All right, I mean, well, that's great. So but what you're telling me is that he's one of the best at his profession. Well, I've seen corruption on all levels, so, you're telling me that a person who's really good at accounting can't fix the books for one reason or another? Like, there's corruptions at the highest levels historically, and there's corruptions at the lowest levels historically. So like, I'm not going to sit there and assess one person or a person who works part-time at a commission and go, oh, no, these guys are beyond corruption. Like, I simply don't know. And I'm open to the idea that there is some shit going on. Like, I've always said that boxing is corrupt by nature. But as far as the actual glove gate theory goes, I don't believe it. As far as the spiked water thing goes, like, I'm, leaning towards that didn't happen. But I mean, I do think that Wilder did look a little funny before that second fight, but that's something I'm going to get into with my prediction for the Wilder Fury fight. So I'm ready to get into that unless you guys have any final comments about Glovegate.
No, we can move on to the predictions.
All right, man. Well, let's get into it. What do you guys think? It's coming up this weekend. I'm glad it's finally here, man. It feels like fight week, actually, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's great, too, because you know what? I don't have a dog in the race, man. I'm just going to enjoy this fight, and I think I'll be happy either way. What do you guys think? Who's going to win?
I've been thinking about this one lately, and I've been going back and forth because I've the first two fights I picked Wilder by KO, and like the second fight I remember because it was right before the pandemic started, so I watched it in the theater, and I'm like, by the third round I'm like, oh, it's over. There's no way he's surviving because he got hit on the side of the head. I thought it was a legitimate knockdown. I'm like, busted eardrum for sure because he's leaking out of his ear. And I'm excited for this fight this week. It's going to be a great fight. Hopefully, like I said, nothing goes wrong. No COVID positives. No weird stuff at the beginning, first 4 rounds of the fight. But I've been going back and forth, and I think I'm going to go with Fury by, I'll say Fury by decision. I think the reason I say that is I don't know how good Fury's conditioning is going to be, and I don't know if he's going to, because his camp's been broken up and he didn't have COVID. I don't know how that's going to affect him along the course of a fight. So I think he might be trying to box Wilder. I don't think he's going to, I mean, this is just my opinion, just with those laid out. I don't know if he's going to try to bum rush Wilder like last time. And like D-Style said, like Fury was very fortunate that he landed that punch and Wilder's equilibrium was off because it still took Fury a few rounds, and that definitely wasn't Wilder. After the third round, he was just all over the place. But I think it's going to be a decision or possibly late round stoppage. I think I'll stick with decision by Fury. But Wilder, like the power is real, and he's one of the most devastating punchers in maybe boxing history. So there's always that chance that he might land. If I were to say, I would want to see Wilder win because I've followed his career for, I guess, since Kirsten Manswell. I think that was the first fight I watched him, so I would like to see him win. Just from, I enjoy watching his fights, and I do like the possibility of, he's like a home run hitter in baseball. You just need to miss with that one pitch, and then he's gonna knock you out. So, but I think Fury's gonna take it home in the third fight.
Nice, man. And before we get to my hermano Nopal, Long Live Boxing says he's missed the show, man. We appreciate that very much, man. We wanted to keep it going, man, because we love talking boxing, and hopefully when A-Rod's available, he comes to join us. And hopefully, down the line, man, if you'd like to join us, we're always open to having guest hosts. And 92 AKU showing loves. He says that 175 is tougher, always going to be hard to compete in a higher division. Hey, I mean, that's true. You know what I mean? But I think Canelo would just absolutely wipe the floor with Bivol and Better Be. But that's a whole nother subject. You know what I mean? And of course, I was going to feel that way. And 92 AKU's right. Canelo fought the absolute best at 160. You know what I mean? So yeah. Boo Boo and Charlo, I don't want to get into that. And then El Chido says that Wilder was scared, man. That's what was wrong with him. You know what I mean? So we'll see what's going on. G Funky thinks that Wilder looked normal in the rematch until he got dropped. Nopal, what are your thoughts on all this?
On the fight itself, man, I'm just excited that, it's on Saturday, and I don't know who I'm leaning towards, man. I mean, I'd say that Fury has a a better chance, but anything could happen. I have seen some videos of Wilder doing some better stuff, man. I'm just super excited for this fight, man. It's gonna be a good one, and yeah, that's basically all I gotta say, man. There's not much to say for me, man. I I was trying not to get too much into the fight itself, all the stuff, because there's a lot of bullshit associated with it, man. You know, I really don't even say that I want Fury to win, Wilder to win. I mean, because I feel like, with the Wilder thing, I like Wilder. It's just his fans are too extreme, and if Wilder wins, then now we have to deal with, see, we told you and all that. And I just don't want to hear it, man. But at the same time, like I said, I don't really care who wins. With the Wilder thing, it's just that little part. But at the same time, I like Wilder. So if he wins, that's cool. But if Fury continues to do his thing, then that's good too. Maybe we'll get it undisputed at heavyweight. Maybe he'll fight what's his name, Usyk pretty soon or something like that. We'll see, man.
Did you give us a prediction, homie?
Oh, a prediction? I don't got one, man. Like I'm saying, I don't know.
Come on, dude. Come on.
Hey, toss a coin up, man. It could be anybody. I wouldn't bet on this fight. I wouldn't bet on this fight, bro. It could be either guy, man.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. Like, I think it is kind of a close fight in a way. I mean, you guys say a lot of good things. Like, one, Wilder always has the equalizer, man. He has that great straight shot down the pipe that could knock people out. We've seen it time and again, dude. And
Chicano,
yes.
You know what else?
Tell me.
What's his name's wearing that robe, that bad luck robe?
The Versace robe. I saw that, dude. He's he must think that his faith in the Lord, just dominates any other type of energy curse. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I did see that, bro. Like, it's funny you say that, and I'm sure he's aware of that curse too. Very interesting. But you're right. Like,
robe?
The Versace robe. It's this curse that people who've worn the Versace robe have lost. Like Billy Joe Saunders was wearing it. A couple other like notable fighters, and I think some MMA fighters have been seen wearing that robe before a fight. And it's considered to be bad luck, but he's walking around, all comfortable in his Versace robe. You know what I mean? He just must not care.
Fury's
yeah. Yeah.
All right. I'm switching the prediction. Wilder KO third round.
Another thing too is, the odds makers are telling us that this is a close fight. Like, it's 3-1 odds. Like, that's not that far away. Like, to me, like, when I see something that's like 3-1, that's kind of a coin flip, 2-1, and it was closer to 2-1 a little while ago. The odds have gotten slightly wider, 3-1 odds. We've seen upsets like Teofimo Lopez, Lomachenko, and I've seen crazy, like much further odds where people thought the opponent had a good shot. Like, dude, I think it was like, like the Crawford Kell Brook fight was like a negative 4,000 or some bullshit like that, and people were like, "Oh, I don't know, man, Kell Brook, and I didn't know what the hell they were seeing, but they were entertaining this idea that Kell Brook could bring it, But Wilder, he's only got one loss, but there's a lot of like variables that. I've tried to look into, and it's like, I really don't know how this is going to play out too. Like, I do think that there are some factors that we're going to see, like how it plays out on fight night. Like, I do think that Wilder still has that equalizer, but something did look wrong with him, in my opinion, in that second fight, and I said, okay, well, let me look into this a little further. Like, let me take a look at that second fight. And I watched it, and I watched the first 2 rounds. And to me, when I look at those first 2 rounds versus how Wilder looked in the first fight completely, he looked like a completely different fighter, in my opinion. Like, Wilder was crisp in that first fight. He had very good foot movement. There were a lot of times where you could see Wilder just kind of bouncing on his toes a little bit to kind of prepare himself to punch. He had very good upper body movement as well as head movement. He was in the zone. Also in the first fight, he was using his left hand a lot more instead of just kind of like this pawing, like cat type, range finder like he did in the second fight. Like, he was actually utilizing that punch often. You know what I mean? And on top of that too, like, although Wilder was trying to go hit like straight shots to the body, like, he was successfully doing it in that first fight. And on top of that too, before he knocked down Fury in that 12th round, he hit Fury to the chest really hard. And you could tell kind of like offset Fury, and a lot of people don't talk about that. It was a setup, you know what I mean? And so like, I think that he was more on, and I'm like, okay, well, what's going on with him, and then I ended up watching the Luis Ortiz fight. And the thing is he kind of looked the same like he did in the Wilder Fury 2 fight. Like he kind of looked lethargic, a little indifferent. And I remember when I watched that Ortiz fight the first time, and when I watched it again yesterday, I remember thinking, yeah, it took a little while for Wilder to kind of like wake up, you know what I mean? To kind of get that, sweat going, and then he finally started looking for that one shot, but, I think he's starting to get too dependent on that right hand, and it's like when I sit there and I think about it, it's like, okay, well, why is he more dependent on it now? Is it just because he thinks that ultimately all he has to do is land it? Did he get lazy? Like, why isn't he using his left hand as much anymore? Is his left hand shot? Like, I've heard him say a lot of things. Like, if you hear a lot of his podcasts, he says, hey, man, I'm not 100%. I haven't been 100% ever in a fight, and it's like, maybe his body's breaking down a little bit. I do think that's a possibility. But when I look at this fight and I look at Wilder and Fury going at it again, I think that, Wilder is going to bring everything that he has to this one. I think he's going to be ready to go. It's obvious that he's taking this one seriously. We've heard in previous camps that, Wilder wanted things his way. He wouldn't show up all the time. There's been camps where he wouldn't even throw a certain punch because he was trying to protect his hands in the lead up to a fight. Looks to me like he's active, and he's going head first into this fight. He wanted this trilogy. He could have easily gotten out of it. He's the one who sued for it. He's going there to win. You know what I mean? And so I expect to see fireworks. Like I do think that Fury has a lot of natural advantages. Like on the outside, he knows how to keep a distance, but he also knows how to fight very well on the inside, and dominate on the inside, in my opinion. And is just a much bigger guy, and I think that Wilder is preparing for everything, but I think that Wilder's best shot is to try to knock Fury out early. Like, I think it's going to be fireworks early. I think that Wilder's going to do a much better job of trying to set up his punch. But I think, and based on what I've seen in the second fight, like, I don't think that he was drugged. I think that it just took him a while to get going. And by the time he got going, he was bludgeoned already, and he just didn't have enough stamina to really just set off that right hand right down the pipe. Like, he just couldn't get it going anymore. Fury didn't respect him. So, like, I think that if Wilder does have a shot, he's got to get it done early. He's got to set it up early, because if Fury does start bringing the pain, eventually there's going to be a point where I don't think he's going to be able to pull the trigger because of the abuse he's taken as well as his stamina. So if I had to guess, I'd say I think I have Fury dominating towards the end of the fight. So I would say possibly maybe ninth, 10th round KO. But I also would not be surprised if we saw some fireworks early in this fight.
Yeah, I agree. Like, if I were to hedge my bet, it would be Wilder by KO before the 6th. But I think Fury, I think it's going to be, like I said, decision Fury. But those were great observations, because I noticed the same thing in the Ortiz, the second fight. Like, Wilder was just like getting out boxed, and he's lucky he didn't get caught with something like he did in the first Ortiz fight, which was in an exchange. But he was just relying on that right hand. It's sort of like what the great Customato said, is that your greatest strength will one day become your greatest weakness. And Wilder's greatest strength is that he's a one-dimensional power puncher for the most part, and then that sort of was his greatest weakness in the last few fights, because he's relying on that one hand. Like the famous quote he always has, like, "You need to be perfect with 12 rounds. I only need to be perfect for like 3 seconds," or whatever he says. And clearly, but if you can't land it, then it doesn't matter. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what goes down, especially like I'm really interested to seeing at the weigh-in, or even in the first few rounds, how Fury looks, because I don't know. I mean, if he had COVID, and I mean, it affects everyone differently, I understand, but I want to see like how breaking up his camp between starting in the US, taking a break, then going to the UK, having the camp, and now coming back to the US, was that a little too much travel for him? And we've seen in past heavyweight fights where the maybe not putting it as a priority. I'm not saying Fury isn't, but like when Hasim Rahman knocked out Lennox Lewis was doing a more extracurricular type of activities, and then Hasim Rahman was focused. So it'll be interesting to see. And it seems like there's nothing, like, Wilder's might put out outrageous claims, but there's no question that he's focused for this fight, though. He definitely is focused, and I think people get lost in that. Sometimes they mix up whether like his focus with the claims he makes, because he might say crazy things and believe crazy things, but he's still training very hard for this fight.
Totally. Nopal, you got any final thoughts, man, before we move on?
Yeah, I wanted to say that. Yeah, Wilder did look different in the second fight, but I wanted to say that you also have to realize that there was the one that was really different is Tyson Fury in the first fight. I think that his game plan was, let me see what Wilder has, and if the going gets tough, I'm gonna just try to survive and not get knocked out. But if I can do some things in there, I'm going to win these rounds. And that's what he did in the first fight. But I believe that he was a bit scared and he didn't have confidence that he could um, bully Wilder. So I think when the fight was over and he went for the next training camp, I think that his team was telling him, listen, you can get in there and bully this guy. You took his power shots already and they didn't knock you out. So I think that gave him a lot of confidence. So he went in there with a different game plan and a different strategy and an altogether different attitude. And you could see that he was very confident in the second fight. So, and he did hit Wilder in the ear. So, if you think that if somebody thinks that Wilder looked messed up, it is, man. Try getting your ear busted and see how you walk around. You know.
That's right, man. That's right. All right. Well, we're looking forward to that one. We'll see how it plays out, dude. Maybe somebody will do a round by round. We'll see. But, dude, I wanted to get into Canelo Plant, man. We didn't have too much of a chance to talk about it because we missed out for the week. But, dude, we missed the infamous press conference. And now this fight is about a month away. So I want to know your guys' thoughts. Like, what are your thoughts on this lead up, man? How are you feeling? Like, what'd you think of the press conference?
It was definitely the most exciting press conference we've seen as of late because a lot of the press conferences are honestly boring, especially now that they're done over like Zoom or Skype. A lot of them, it's just sort of like there's no character. There's nothing. The fighters aren't doing much to promote it. So I was definitely in favor of it. Obviously, I think Caleb Plant did a lot of. I mean, it's different because Canelo doesn't speak like fully English, but I think Caleb Plant's really resting on the positive drug test. And then, but Canelo got him in the face to face. He definitely edged him on that. So I'm definitely excited for the fight because as much as I think Canelo's going to win, Caleb Plant is still a legitimate boxer, and he is very skilled. But I think Canelo's going to run through him. But I'm excited. Month out, we have a lot of hopefully nothing happens, and we have a good end of the year with a lot of the boxing matches coming up.
Don't ball. Dude, Canelo left Caleb Plant bleeding. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, that was funny, bro. I remember when it was happening. I wasn't even aware of the press conference, and then I get a text from you. You're like, "Hey, they're getting chippy," in the press conference. Check it out. So I went immediately on there, and all I could see was they were arguing. So I had to rewind it a little bit and slow it down. And yeah, at first it looked like Canelo got pushed down or something, like when in that exchange after he pushed Caleb, but it was a different guy with like a mustard shirt that was in there trying to break it up a little bit. But I thought it was really cool. You know what I mean? At the same time, I believe it could have been not staged, but kind of. I think that it was instigated sort of by not having somebody in the middle separating them. There's always somebody that's kind of in the middle just in case they decide to, you know, kind of hit each other or push each other. Like a barrier. So, you know, um, I think that because I saw the first face off was like in a green room, it looked already like there was some bad blood already right there. I can tell from Caleb Plant's expression, like he's on a mission to be very, very to get inside Canelo's head. And I think that I saw that also at I forget whose fight. You can see that Canelo's trainer's trying to say hi to Caleb Plant and get maybe like a wave back from him. He from far away he's trying to say hi and this guy's just mad dogging him. You know what I mean? Like you ain't nobody, that type of thing. Like he snubbed the trainer. So there's already kind of like some uncomfortableness between these two guys. And then Caleb starts talking all this mess about the positive test. Man, if you want to bring that up, then why you sign up make the fight, At this point you're kind of saying that whether Canelo's on steroids or not, you're willing to fight the dude, and you're putting yourself in a weird position too because you're over there capping for Victor Conte saying, calling him the Nipsey Hussle of boxing, saying that everybody deserves a second chance. You say that when somebody says that in response to you saying that Canelo, so that same rule doesn't fit for Canelo. He don't deserve a second chance. Not to mention he was exonerated basically. Well, not really exonerated, but I thought the hair follicle test would prove that he wasn't using anything intentionally, and that was enough in the system to blame him for anything. But you're bringing that up, and you just keep talking about it like, that made no difference when it was time to sign the fight. Just looking for reasons to get in Canelo's head. But Canelo's been in this situation before where people talk mess about him and stuff like that. It kind of pisses him off, but we haven't really seen it affect his performance yet. And I thought it was pretty cool, man, because you need this kind of thing to sell pay-per-views, really. So I mean, I'm hoping that this fight, I mean, I'm gonna buy it for sure, and I'm thinking that it does about 600,000 pay-per-view buys, and I think that's pretty good, seeing as how Caleb isn't that much of a draw. He's not a draw at all. So I mean, if Caleb went and did a pay-per-view by himself pre-Canelo, he probably would have sold about 30,000 pay-per-views at the most. You know what I mean? So I think 600K is a good projection for what the pay-per-view will do. And I'm very excited for this fight as well.
Dude, I'm excited too, man. And I like bad blood before a fight. Like, I'm okay with like gentlemen, kind of talking to each other before they get in the ring and being friends afterwards. But dude, when two fighters genuinely don't like each other and there's beef, like, it does lend to anticipation for a fight because there's bad blood, and these guys don't like each other. It's clear. Caleb Plant's trying to get in Canelo's head, but it's like you said, Nopal, like, he always comes, like, there's never been a time where I thought, oh, well, Canelo's not prepared for this one. The dude is always prepared. He's dealt with all kinds of dudes, dealt with all kinds of attitudes. Like, if anything, this is just going to look bad for Caleb Plant when they get in the ring. Like, now, if Caleb Plant gets in trouble, like, I don't think that Canelo's going to carry him. Like, I think that Canelo carried Callum Smith. It's pretty evident. He even winks at him like, hey, I'm not going to knock you out. The crowd booed a little bit, but dude, I mean, he was just beating that guy's ass. And even though he continued to beat his ass, like, he didn't go for the finish. I think Caleb Plant now is going to realize that he's probably going to end up getting knocked out, or he's going to have to win on a decision. Like, I think that the press conference was a lot of fun, man. I was watching. I didn't expect it to go down like that. Could it have been staged? Like, all I can say is that Canelo has always been a professional towards his opponent until maybe like the weigh-in. Like, yeah, he kind of had his head against Danny Jacobs' head, but I thought that was a little staged. The rematch with Triple G, and the head-to-head thing at the weigh-in, like, I thought that was like, that could have been a little tense, sure. But before that, like, I've never seen him like push anybody or provoke his opponent. But I think Caleb Plant was a little close to him, man, and I think he wanted his space. And after Canelo shoved Caleb Plant, Caleb Plant came around, tried to fake with the right, like, tried to distract. And then, he got smacked up and he was left bleeding, man. Like, and you could tell he didn't know what the hell happened to him, man. It was funny, and he's sitting there trying to talk, and, he was saying some shit that maybe, was true, and he's sitting there getting in Canelo's head. But some of the stuff I'm like, okay, he's like, oh, what? Cotto's brother can fucking put you on, deer legs, but I can't, you know what I mean? And I'm kind of like, all right, well, I mean, dude, that was a long time ago, bro. Like, he's fought much better punchers and has had a rock solid chin since. And he's like, oh, people said I couldn't dog walk Uskadagi, and what happened? I dog walked him. I'm like, well, anybody can go back and watch those last 4 rounds. I mean, if you think Caleb Plant can win, go back and watch those last 4 rounds. Like, he can't keep up, dude, like, in my opinion, with a high pace. He's a guy who gets tired with that activity. I do think that he's training as best as he can, and I've been curious about his footage. Canelo's got all kinds of footage, but, there's very limited amount of training footage for Caleb Plant. I saw him skipping rope, which I was thoroughly impressed with. I like it when boxers skip rope. Actually pretty impressive. Like, I didn't know he was that good at skipping rope, but I mean, it's probably some of the best rope work that I've seen in a while. Not that I seek it out, but I mean, it's pretty impressive, but the one thing that I had an eye on was his heavy bag training. Like, I saw him hit the heavy bag quite a few times, and dude, he's still nursing that right hand. Like, he has no power with it. Everything is like aggressive left hand, soft left hand, aggressive left hand, and then a right, but it's a straight right, which should be his power punch. It's not there. You could see that it's not there. And so, I mean, I'm not saying that he's necessarily a one-handed fighter. I'm not sure if he's protecting that right hand, but either way, I mean, there's no way he's going to be able to knock out Canelo. And I'm sure he might know that. Like, it would be a mistake for him to like put all his effort into risking his hands to try to knock out Canelo. And it's clear to me that he's already kind of a one-handed fighter. I think this is going to be one-sided. I think there's a reason that these odds are so wide. The bookies see that this is a one-sided fight. I mean, this is like the widest fight he's had in a while, if we're not counting the Yildirim fight. I mean, Callum Smith wasn't too bad. Billy Joe wasn't too bad, but these odds are wide, dude, and it's like, I understand why. So yeah, man, I think that it's just going to be, all downhill from here as far as going undisputed goes. Caleb Plant's going to go in there. He's going to try his best, but I just happen to look at the fight and I think about what Caleb Plant does well, and I just see Canelo being able to neutralize that in a fairly short amount of time. Like, he's going to start getting hit with some body shots. He's not going to be able to lead with that left hook quickly because although he has quicker hands than Canelo, like Canelo's not scared to punch with the puncher, and once Caleb Plant tastes a counter hook, he's not going to want any more of that. You know what I mean? So he's going to have to be very selective about how he comes in. If he comes in, I think that he's going to try to do like a back foot, peppering the jab type win. He's probably going to run because he's got no choice, but I don't think it's going to matter much. I think Canelo is going to dominate this fight.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing I noticed from watching Caleb Plant when he trains and even in the fights is he doesn't throw his hooks that tight. They're sort of because he's a longer limbed fighter. He sort of has like he crooks his elbow and they're sort of like he hooks from like mid range, which I think is really going to be a detriment to him because Canelo's going to counter him all day, whether it's countering where he's hooking and he counters like with hook to the body, or if he's just coming just straight up top. Because he does this. I don't know if you've seen it, Chicano. He does this like because he's long limbs, so he's not really getting inside, but he's not outside. He's in that mid range, and he has those hooks where it's like his elbow's sort of extended. It's sort of like I don't know. It's sort of odd
No,
to
I know what you
describe.
mean.
Yeah, you know what I mean. He'll like pair those together, and I'm like, you're wide open. And I think he does. I honestly think he weight trains himself a little to get down to 168 because when they were in that like green screen room with No Paul mentioned earlier, it looked like to me that his stomach was a little distended, and I'm like, oh, he's definitely. I think he's weight drained. I think he's already trying to cut at this point in time. I might be totally wrong, but I've never seen his body sort of like that up until recently. So it might just be me overthinking it, but he also is with Victor Conti, I think, for his nutrition, and Victor Conti helps Sean Porter get down in weight with his crazy weight cuts, and I'm sure he's going to help Caleb Plant. And with Victor Conti, I think he's. I mean, I don't know. I'm all for second chances, but I'm sure he's good at what he does with the nutrition. They do a lot of blood work to see where you're like nutritionally deficient, but I don't know. I mean, I think at a high level in sports, people use substances to really just maybe get through their training camp. But I mean, that it is what it is. Victor Conti might have decent supplements for like the commercially, just for, like for selling through snack, just like the general public. But I don't know. I think it's sort of might stop at that. My opinion on that because you don't know what goes on behind closed doors either. So who knows?
Totally, man. Totally. All right. Well, hey, dude, there was one last subject that I was thinking about bringing up. Did you want to get into the Teofimo stuff, or what's your time frame look like, Run?
No, I'm good. I'm good. We can hit one more.
Sure, man. Well, I'm sure you guys know by now. It looks like the Teofimo fight is postponed. It looks like Triller might not be doing it. It also looks like Teofimo's got this idea of fighting for undisputed at 140 at a catch weight against Josh Taylor and possibly fighting for all of their belts all together. I mean, it's some
Doesn't even
crazy
make
shit going
sense.
on with that dude. So, I mean, like, it's a lot to pick apart. I can't say any of this looks good for Teofimo. What are your thoughts, man?
I agree. I mean, I I've been following Tiafimo since it was probably like 17 or maybe a few years ago. But I mean, great fighter, great skills, but it's definitely doesn't look like it was the great business move it looked like 9 months ago or a year ago whenever they won the purse bid because since then it's just been chaos for him. Got COVID, rescheduled. Now they're rescheduled for like the fifth time or sixth time, whatever it is now. But yeah, it's not good. It's not good. It almost looks better. He ended up getting new Bob Arum deal, but it's almost like it seems like Triller wants out. So maybe they just wash their hands with this and they just go back to purse bid and hopefully someone puts it up because at this point it doesn't seem like Triller because Triller doesn't know what they're doing. Their head of boxing resigned, so it seems like they're just in for the circus fights. And like if Tiafimo, the smart business move would have been because he would have got paid the same since it was a purse bid and he's guaranteed money. It would have been better that he maybe tagged along one of the YouTube fights or the Oscar De La Hoya fight. Obviously, that didn't come to fruition, but if he would have just been on like as we like to say the co-main event of that fight, he would have got tons of publicity because there've been a ton of casuals that would have casuals and new boxing fans that would have tuned into that. So, but he put himself in this predicament. He's a grown man. He made his decision and sort of has to live with it at this point. But at this point, I just want hopefully it goes back to purse bid. Hopefully DAZN gets it so I could just watch it on DAZN and then we just move on. And then with regards to the catch weight undisputed for what 135 and 140. First of all, that doesn't even make sense because you can't fight for the 135 belts at 137 or 139. That doesn't even make sense. You're above the weight class. So what he should do is either what I think he should do is fight Haney next after Cambosis and just get all the undisputed discrepancies out of the way. If not, vacate all your belts and move up to 140, maybe take one fight and then Taylor, or just go straight to Taylor. Just whatever you want to do, but you need to make big fights because you've basically wasted a year off of your career now, and you had so much momentum coming off the when you beat Lomachenko, and you cannot take another 6 months off. You need to fight now and just get it over with. So fight Cambosis. I don't care if it's even televised. Just get out of the way and get in a big fight next. That's it.
Man, I agree with all that stuff. Nopal, what do you think, man? What's up with your boy Teofimo, dude?
Man, I've been pissed off at him for a while now, man. And his interviews ain't doing him no justice. He's over there telling people that, he's a businessman at the end of the day. That kind of pissed me off because I think that he hasn't gone through and shown us what he can do enough, and been in these risky fights. He's not even. I think that he's a big 135 pounder. I think that I would respect him more if he moved up to 140 and then fought guys a little bit closer to his size. End up at 140, 47, a welterweight. I would respect that more than barely starting off your career and already talking about you're a businessman, bro. We don't want to hear that. We want to see you in some tough fights. As far as this whole move with the Triller thing and all that, I think that if you look at we of course all of us know all the negative things associated with that. He lost the momentum, all that, everything. I agree with everything Ron PMC said, but I think there's some positive things. I'd like to think about it like when I meet a new person. Sometimes, like I'm introduced to a new person, I don't agree with everything they say right away. You know what I'm saying? I'm more of a reserved person because I gotta see somebody's personality and I gotta judge a person kind of. So I think that a lot of times I find myself like arguing with people sometimes, and I think that actually sets it up because you show a person that you don't have a weak mentality, and then they respect that more in the long run. And I think I see it right now with this whole situation. I think that Teofimo showed us all that he's willing to, go around Bob Arum to get the fights that he wants. And that's the part I do respect about it. At least he tried. He showed him, you know what I mean? He showed him that he was willing to do whatever he had to do to get to make his goal accomplished. He's willing to go around him. Now Bob Arum knows how far he can go with him. You know what I mean? If Teofimo tells Bob something like, "Hey, I want this fight," okay, and that Bob Arum has to think about what this guy's willing to do to get that fight. Oh, okay, because I'm not dealing with a normal fighter that's just gonna sit there and listen to what I said. If he doesn't, you know, Bob Arum just says, "Hey, I only want to give you $1 million for this." Delfino is gonna look at him like, "What are you talking about?" You know what I mean? He's gonna actually give him some pushback on that. He's gonna clap back and say, "Hey, what are you talking about? I'm worth more than $1 million." So that instantly, I think it put I gave to it's it's gonna give Delfino more negotiating power now, and it's gonna. I'm pretty sure that Bob Arum's gonna respect him more. Now he knows he's dealing with a person that's not a yes man. So I think that's the one positive thing. Now, is it worth all that time that he lost and all that? Well, he's still a young man, but we're gotta see if he can pick up his momentum back and all that. As far as the catch weight thing, man, he's over there looking very delusional with that. Why would you even want that? You're already okay. So there are some discrepancies, but let's just say he's the undisputed guy at 135. You're already that. If you want to move up real quick, you're not gonna have to. You might not even have to vacate the belts. You know, so you don't have to put your belts on the line to get that fight. And if Josh Taylor says, "Yeah, let's fight," I mean, best case scenario, you could be undisputed at 135 and 140 without having to put yours at risk, because you could still lose at 140 and you might still be able to keep all them belts at 135. So you don't even got to do that stupid shit trying to say it was like Leo Santa Cruz and nobody. First of all, nobody even cared about whatever mix-up they had with the belts on that fight, and for you to use that as an example of unifying, two undisputed champs for all the chips, bro, that ain't never gonna happen. And just like Run said, it's the limit of 140. So you got to be under 140 to fight, or you got to be at 140 and under to fight at for those belts. And same thing goes with 135. You got to be at 135 and under. So there's no way that scenario is even possible. You know.
And no way, because like, what are they gonna do? Like the Ray Leonard, Donnie Lalonde, two weigh-ins? Like, there's no way you'd even make that happen because what Taylor's talking about moving to 147, and you
And
want
he's
him to
not going
come
to be
down to
able to
one.
make 140, right? So you
No,
would have to have two weigh-ins, one after 2 days of weigh-ins. One weigh-in would be for okay, Taylor, you got to weigh 135 this day. You know what I mean? Okay, we both made this weigh-in. Now the next day we're gonna both rehydrate a little bit and go to 140.
yeah,
I
it's just
mean, come on,
ridiculous.
dude.
Yeah,
It's
no, I agree with all that, and I think, as far as being in like Josh Taylor's shoes, you might be thinking like, who the hell is Teofimo Lopez? Like, why would he even need to entertain that? He's the undisputed 140-pound champion with options himself. Like he could easily just continue to reign at 140. He's the guy you got to see. That's how it is. Or he could move up to 147 like he's discussed, and it's like, yeah, dude, it's just a really bad look for, I don't really know what Teofimo's thinking, trying to set some type of precedent to fight undisputed at a catch weight. Like, I mean, that's bizarre to me. Like, I don't understand like why he thinks that Taylor would even agree to that when Taylor is not even really calling him out. He seems to not care. Like, I've seen his interviews, like he's okay with fighting Teofimo, but it's not like Teofimo's like the guy that he needs to see. You know what I mean? He's a
And
135 pounder. He's
Chicano,
very good. Yeah.
I don't know if you caught that interview, but on one of those interviews, he actually said that Teofimo wasn't even undisputed. He actually said what Run said is that Teofimo should go fight the real champ who he could. Well, I think he's capping a little bit for Haney, but he's still making kind of sense right there, which that should kind of be Teofimo's plan. If he's a legacy boxer, then what he would want to do is go clear up that discrepancy and with Haney, and then fight. You know, then he's a legit undisputed 100% all the way, no disputes about that. But then he could fight Taylor. So Taylor, with his interview, he doesn't have much respect for Teofimo, to be honest. Sorry
No,
about that,
dude.
bro.
No, it's all good. I mean, you make good points, and that's my thing. Like, I've always been okay with the Haney fight. I think that it should happen, and also like, I understand that Teofimo's a young man, but dude, like, I don't know how much longer he can make 135. You know what I mean? Like, it might be to his detriment if he keeps up like this. Like, I've always said, I'm okay with the Lomachenko rematch. I'm okay with the Haney fight. And then after that, I'm okay with him moving up. So, I mean, he could choose to do what he wants to do, but if he's going to move up, I say it's at 140. You know what I mean? So that's kind of my final thoughts on Teofimo. Like, like you guys said, the steam is gone. He's not the big star that he thinks he is. He could have made 6 million in a year's time if he had just taken a lesser amount. Who knows what things could have looked like if he continued to grow, but he's lost a lot of momentum. So, I mean, I'm sure we'll continue to see this play out. It sucks that we've been waiting a year to see him fight Kambosos, somebody that nobody really cares about. You know what I mean? So we'll see how that plays out. So I think that's about it, man. Unless you guys have some final thoughts, we can wrap this one up.
I have one more thing.
Yeah, man. What you got?
Just generally speaking, I think the best thing that boxers should do, if they can, is stay active, because I think that's how you're gonna, especially unless you're like a cash cow. But Canelo's proven that wrong. But you'll get the most money, I think, by staying active, even if like your individual purses in themselves might be smaller, but you're going to be getting more frequent paychecks. And then also you're putting your body in a great state where you're ready to go and you're never really out of shape. And really it's your mindset too, because as we see when boxers take time off, and whether it's forced time off, whether if they're in jail or if they just have injuries or stuff like that, they never come back the same. And we don't know what Teofimo Lopez looks like. It's almost been a year at this point. So I agree with you. He should have just stayed active, just got Kambosos out of the way, maybe under top rank, just got it done out of the way. And then he might have had one fight since then and maybe another fight in December. Who knows? And he could have made probably the same amount of money that he might not even make for if the fight goes back to purse bid. So I think the main thing that boxers should learn is stay active. It's good for your career. in the way of your body, and also it's going to be good for your pocketbook because you're building momentum to bigger fights in the end too. So that's it.
All right, man. Well, hey, dude, it was great having you guys back, dude. Looking forward to next week. Thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll catch you next time. Peace.
Peace.